For how many of you is this your first cannabis conference? Welcome. And how many of you are involved in the industry either through employment or investment? Congratulations. And congratulations to us all. We stand here at one of the most exciting times in one of the most exciting industries, cannabis. Perhaps one of the oldest medicines in the world. Certainly one of the most valuable plants, and arguably one of the most misunderstood. So what does the industry look like today? These are two of the numbers that are most often cited by media: the size of the market and its growth rate. What do they actually mean? What is $10 billion? $10 billion is the total retail value of all the cannabis sold legally in the United States. It does not include all the cannabis sold illegally. It does not include all of the money spent around cannabis, which is at least twice what is spent on cannabis. What may be apparent in this chart is the growth of the legal market, which is represented by the bars on the bottom, at the expense of the illegal market, the red line on top. What I hope is also apparent in this chart is that the legal market is growing far faster than the illegal market is declining. One can attribute this to the arrival of new consumers. What I hope is also apparent in this chart is that the adult use market, the lighter part of the bars, is growing much faster than the medical market. In fact, in states that have full adult use and medical laws, we fully expect a normalized ratio to be 90% adult use to 10% medical. Spending is growing at a pretty fast clip. Of course, taxes follow. When we look out from the end of last year to 2021, we see a doubling of taxes in just 4 years. Of course, that total output number, the 2-to-1 ratio, holds still as well. What I hope is conveyed through this is that while 27% seems like a very high number, the total impact is even greater. But just how high is 27%? If we looked at multi-billion-dollar industries in the last 50 years that are growing at double digits, where does cannabis stand? Top? Anyone else? Close. So we did this. We went back the last 50 years, found $5 billion and greater industries growing at double digits. We looked at basic cable. We looked at home video. We looked, of course, at internet adoption. And we found that cannabis is indeed growing faster than all of those with one exception: internet adoption. Which of course led us to conclude that perhaps the only thing Americans want more than cannabis is good Wi-Fi. Of course, there's plenty to like in this industry, with margins that are extremely beneficial to operators as well as investors. We do expect the discrepancy between these to normalize over time, but as of now, they're healthy, and as a result of that health, they are inciting a fair amount of investment. When we look at sectors on a year-over-year basis for the last 3 years, we see the largest increase in investment in the cultivation and retail spaces. Not a huge surprise, given that both ends of the supply chain are experiencing some margin adjustment. The second largest sector for investment growth is in the biotech and pharma space. Cannabis as medicine. Cannabis as medicine has been known to have over 700 disease conditions that it can address. When I think about the issues we had investing in the pharma space 15 years ago, those issues are still valid. Those are issues of patent expiration that pharmaceutical companies have been facing. With legalization, they're facing another big issue, and that's a 15% decline in opioid consumption in states that are fully legalized. It is not a surprise that when pharma can play, they will. And investments are gearing up for high acquisition multiples in that space. All of this makes cannabis a very exciting place to be. But this industry is not without its challenges. What are some of these challenges? Yes, regulations are a challenge. Pricing is a challenge. Any guesses here? Ed?
The fact that it's a gray area, there's many undefined aspects about it, and it's a civil war between the feds and the states. So it's very, opportune for the taking, but not defined.
Yeah, certainly. Plenty of federal-state conflict-related challenges. One of the challenges is price. Any guesses as to the average retail price of a pound of cannabis in the U.S. last year?
1,500.
2,000.
Retail. A pound of cannabis. $5,100 for 1 pound of cannabis. 1,350 times more expensive than spinach, which averaged $3.83. Any guesses as to the average retail price of an ounce of extract in the U.S. last year? 600. 1,000. $1,400 for an ounce of extract. I would have had $91 left in my pocket if I bought an ounce of gold last night. Any guesses as to the price of a barrel of cannabis oil retail in the U.S. last year? For reference, crude closed at $69 last night. 90. 10,000. 16,000. Anyone else? The average retail price of a 55-gallon barrel of cannabis oil in the U.S. last year was $5 million. Needless to say, there's some room for these prices to come down. And for those of you who have interest, I plan to go into a lot more detail on the immense margin and sector implications of this inevitable price decline during a more in-depth investment talk on Saturday morning. Another challenge is that market, yes, does have some federal-state conflict, but is driven primarily by local law. In California alone, there are 539 governments, only 180 of whom have passed a law around this plant. 2/3 of our state is still dark. When one is making investments, it's important to look at the total market size, but also to look at the total addressable market size for your particular investment. It may not even be intrastate, it may not even be intracity, depending on the business. An industry growing at 27% doubles in size every 32 months. There are 30,000 cannabis businesses in the US today. It's extremely challenging for those of us inside the industry to keep track of all the moving parts. It is nearly impossible to make investment decisions without that knowledge. Another challenge is the government and the government's stance on this plant. Cannabis remains, along with heroin and acid, a Schedule I substance. Cocaine fares much better, Schedule II. When I look at this map, I see 30 states with medical laws. I see 9 states with adult use laws. I see 22 states that have pending legislation. I see the very construct of the House and the Senate changing such that it is politically unfeasible to oppose legalization. I see full federal legalization by 2021 with one caveat. The warning sign on the side mirror of your car may be true for the windshield of Cannabis Life. I look forward to the day when the federal government can free up its precious resources and address far more dangerous and lethal issues that include falling coconuts and selfies. Over 150 families will thank you. This is not just a US phenomenon, this is a global phenomenon. There are 22 countries around the world that have cannabis laws already passed, and 43 that are considering them. The prospect for cannabis to be treated like every other agricultural commodity and freely traded around the world is immense. So how does one get involved in the industry? There are many ways to put your money to work in this industry, and I plan to go into more detail on these as well on Saturday morning. What's next? I have no doubt that big ag, big food, big pharma, big tobacco, big alcohol will come jump into the space as soon as they're allowed to. I also have no doubt that big entertainment and big hospitality will follow. Restaurants will have cannabis pairings in addition to wine pairings. Movie theaters will have THC sound, not just surround sound. There will be cannabis tinctures on every shelf in every pharmacy in the US. This is not the future, this is the past. This was true from 1841 to the early 1900s. And while the pharmacies were plenty, the suppliers were familiar. Their names were Abbott Labs, Merck, and Eli Lilly. The impact that this plant will have on our food, fuel, fiber, paper, medicine, the environment, social justice, civil rights, and cognitive liberty is undeniable. I'm also extremely optimistic. I'm extremely optimistic that while we will continue to use cannabis for creativity and contemplation, that its impact on our community, our compassion, our compatibility, our collective consciences will be felt around the world. I'm extremely optimistic that we will, as we titrate this planet towards global homeostasis, arrive at a time when we stop putting each other in cages for having a relationship with a plant. What makes us human is not as much ourselves as it is each other. And cannabis has one of the unique advantages in its ability to weave the social fabric around us a little bit tighter. Thank you for your time. Be kind to each other.